We'll get started with Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Sorry. Hey, Paul, I just wanted your thoughts on the players who were claimed today and how that kind of affects, your taxi squad. And if it maybe, I know you don't want to keep young guys on there, but if this maybe forces your hand a little bit more than it had been yesterday.
No, I mean, even before Luka got claimed today, we still have young guys there, right? So we have the ability to have them practice with us and then go and play for the Moose. So that rotation will happen. So that won't change anything. And Burden will join the taxi squad. And we're a ways away from the American League starting and going. So it really doesn't affect us a whole heck of a lot.
We'll go next to Ted Wyman from the Winnipeg Sun. Go ahead, Ted.
Hi, Paul. As opposed to Luka and Eric getting claimed, Mathieu Perreault didn't get claimed. I know you had a conversation with him about the procedural move that was made for him to be put on waivers, but he sure looked happy to be back on the ice when he found out he wasn't taken.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, I think we all understood that there was a really, really low risk, that this was all related to the salary cap and at Matty's number, really confident, but geez, there's always that chance, right? So waiting for the clock to hit 11 and he was relieved and we were as well, but there wasn't the concern with that. Matty's on a big number. Most of these teams have their, they all do. They got their roster and their numbers almost set like that. So we were real confident that Matty would get through and be back with the Jets.
We'll go next to Jeff Hamilton from the Winnipeg Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, I came in a little bit late, so I apologize if this was asked. I don't think it was. But with Cole Perfetti doing his interview today, obviously he's in town. Do you know what your full options are for him just with COVID? And, is the AHL still an option? As the OHL figures itself out? I'm not looking for what your expectations are with him, just so much that you know what your options are at this point.
I mean, the option is he starts with us, right? And then he's assigned to either taxi squad or the American Hockey League. We'll just want him playing at the highest level that it's possible for him to play at, but playing, right? That's the key piece, getting in games. So that's the plan for him.
We'll go next to Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Paul, has there been any thought rather put into what you intend to do goaltending wise with Eric going to New Jersey?
Yeah, well, we have to have a goaltender on our taxi squad, so Burden will come in and join that.
We'll go back to Jeff Hamilton from the Free Press. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hey, Paul, just another rookie question. You've been coaching in this league for a long time. How are rookies handled today versus maybe what they were handled earlier in your careers as far as introduction to team and that kind of stuff?
Well, it seems to me the players, like we get these guys have a chance to play at a far younger age. So when you ask that question, I'm kind of thinking of an article I read, and I know I've alluded to it before, but I remember Pat Burns kind of defending himself for not playing Joe Thornton more, right? He was playing on the fourth line. He was a young kid. And the idea was he had to put on some weight, right? He had to get way bigger. The guy's he's a monster now, but he wasn't powerful enough. The way the game has changed, the style of hockey that's played allows these guys to come in and play at a much, much younger age, be physically slighter, and still survive. I mean, I think skating there is a premium for these guys, but it's a completely different game, right? You don't have to be a big man at a young age to play in the NHL and produce in the NHL anymore. So that's the big one. So what changes also that goes with that is how the room, integrates a young player. I know the young players had a far more challenging time 20 years ago, fitting in, right? They had to earn their stripes, weren't allowed in the training room. There were no massages for those guys. Well, there were no massage therapists back then either, but they were back of the bus, last on the elevator, all those things. It was much more difficult now, and we've kind of got to throw. There's so many young kids that are kind of coming in. It's pretty normal for these guys now.
I'll go back to Ted Wyman from the Sun. Go ahead, Ted.
Hey, Paul, you mentioned the other day that Jansen Harkins was certainly still a player in the mix for the bottom six. We see him out here skating now. Is he an option for opening night?
Gonna have to wait to see where he is tomorrow. So he still hasn't come back to full practice, right? It wasn't a contact issue for him today, so he wasn't in the gold non-contact uniform, but he hasn't had a push yet. So we leaned on him a little bit today, and we are being very, very cautious with it. Yeah, he's a possible player for us, but he'd have to be able to get up and down the ice without any, this early. And then we're going into 5 and 7, 6 and 9. We don't want to have anybody with a nagging injury right now. So we'll be real cautious with it.
We'll go back to Sean Reynolds from Sportsnet. Go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Paul, we were talking with Matthew about that second line power play and how you've got a player from the top line cycling in there. He explained it's a need for a right shot on that line. I'm wondering how you plan to go forward with that and in choosing which of those players you were going to send out on that line. Is it just basically who's going hottest that day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's so. Yes, performance is the driver of that. It'll also be where players are in their shifts, how many minutes they've played over the course of the game. The guy that's got a little fresher, maybe can stay out. I'll watch the. I mean, performance at the end of the day, but you're going to see all three righties cycle into that spot. And because each one of them is different in the way they approach it. So it's a different style for the killers too. Mark is kind of almost maybe more surgical in the holes that he tries to find. He's played that position, so he understands it differently. Patty's got more motion in there. Blake almost looks to get to the net a little bit heavier. So they're all different. Some of it may end up being how our opponents play the slot player. But what it is it gives that Mark Scheifele's unit, when it has possession, there's not a tremendous amount of motion, and they can play out there longer, right? So it allows me to get those guys some extra power play time, but still get that unit, that call it the second unit. We'll see who's scoring before we do that, but it gives that group another A shooter in that spot.
And we'll go to Sarah Orleski from TSN. Go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Paul. How do you look at the breaking down this season from a coach's perspective? Will you look at things in 5-game blocks, 7-game blocks? Do you have anything in mind yet? How are you approaching at least January?
It'll be sectioned, right? So instead of looking at blocks of games, we will always, look at the environment of blocks. So you've got your one-off coming in Calgary, and then there's definitely the next group of games. That's a 6-game block coming up after that. The 5 and 7 internal on that, you get 2 days. I don't know, Sarah, that we've had how many players we would have had that have ever played a 5 and 7 block. You don't see it in the NHL much anymore. And then going forward, we've got, 2 big road trips. So we'll look at that. In terms of our analysis of the games, we don't, I think when you got 82 games, Sarah, you do that as kind of trying to keep the guys focused on the near term, because it's such a long season at times for these fellas, but this thing's a full-on flat-out sprint. And so there won't be the concern about keeping them focused. There will be no dog days, no Groundhog Day effect to the NHL this year. It's full-on.
And we'll end off with Kelly Moore from CJOB. Go ahead, Kelly.
Apologies to the group if this was already asked, and forgive me, Coach, for the same thing.
No problem.
Trevor Lewis, has he shown enough for him to be under consideration for the Thursday night lineup?
So the simple answer is yes, but he's still on a PTO, so there's some groundwork that has to be covered. But if he's in the mix for sure, Kelly. Like, he's had a really good camp. You know the guy is a player because he's been around. We have people here that are really familiar with him, but that need and that style of play, he fits to a T. He's looked good. Another penalty killer. We need that. So he's most definitely in the mix.
Thanks very much, Coach.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, everyone, and we'll be back here tomorrow.
Thanks, guys.